Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us for the Daily Power Pep Talk. We're really looking forward to this. You are one of the founding partners from Have Her Back Consultancy, and you're going to be talking to us today about all things working from home and the new reality. How is your working from home experience going so far?
Like everybody else, it's a hot mess, I would imagine, right? You're talking to someone who, let's be honest, I've been actually working from home a little bit, 1 to 2 days a week for 20 years.
Okay.
But certainly never, ever under the circumstances, right, that we all find ourselves in today, if we are lucky enough to actually be able to work from home, right, without any of the resources that we've had with all of our families / partners / pets and everything else, right, that comes with it. So certainly a new day for all of us.
So you've been doing this for a while. So what do you think are the top pieces of advice that people can put into practice when they are working from home?
Yeah, well, you know what? I have to be honest. I think I'll tell you what advice that I'm still seeing that is absolutely infuriating to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would agree with this, which I still, even this week, I saw an article saying to make sure that you're the most productive, make sure you have a separate space set up for working from home during COVID-19 that family members really understand. Apparently those writers don't have small children, right?
Or live in tiny shoebox apartments where that's just not an option anyway.
It's not an option. Yeah. And you know what, it's funny. So my own personal circumstance, I'm working from home full time. My husband's lucky enough to be working full time at home. He's got a loud booming voice, by the way, which I don't think I realized so much until now.
Every day now.
And then we have And then we have 3 teenage boys who are home e-learning, right? And are on Chromebooks and doing their video chats and what have you. And so, 7 years ago, we moved to the suburbs and we were so excited to rehab an old home. And we had this open concept and we were so excited about it. About now, that open concept is not seeming like the best choice, the wisest of choices.
Not ideal. But it is the reality, right? And until the curve flattens, this is the situation that we're in. So, what has helped you to be able to cope with the circumstances that you're in, given that your husband's at home, given that you've got the 3 kids at home too?
I think, what I've realized is actually we all have to lean into it. It's actually the best thing that we could ever be doing. First of all, these human moments, right, are really touching, can be really touching in a world with little actual touch these days. So there's that nice part of the humanity of it. But more importantly, all the interruptions and all the disruptions that we're having in our day-to-day working from home is actually going to disrupt the workplace in the best way possible, because it's going to help end some real biases that have really held particularly women back in the workplace. So hear me out.
Yeah, talk me through that. So you think this is it? This is life's change forever. Talk me through why.
Yeah. Listen, I don't just think. I think that the wonderful thing is, so Have Her Back is the consulting agency that I founded with my 2 partners. We actually did a study 2 weeks ago that really looked at this, that talked to American workers at mid to large companies about what their companies are doing well for them, what they're not. And so we were able to really study this. So this was a premise that we had, but the good news is that the results actually bore this out. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But I think to do that, I've got to back up. I mean, I think first and foremost, like everyone else, day in, day out, you're on call after call after call. And everything from a cattail flying by, right, to my partner has a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And you can just imagine, we're on multiple calls every single day. 4-year-olds don't understand, mommy's working now. Can you go do something else? They don't understand it. So he often is disruptive. And I got to be honest, in the best possible way, if you are not too young enough to remember Jerry Maguire, it's literally like these moments where he comes bounding in and he's like he says things like, the human head weighs 9 pounds, right? And you're like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? And so, that's a reality that we're dealing with. And listen, I have the teenage boys. I've got the loud husband. I've got a puppy who's 100 pounds, who needs a lot of attention. And so I'm often barked at. I'm often barked over. And not just by my dog, by my loud voice husband, right? It's just the reality of what we're dealing with today. But as I mentioned, I've been doing this work from home in some way, shape, or form for 20 years. And of course, I did that not in the situation that we're in now, right? I had my kids were at school. My husband was, not in the house, working as well. And so it was probably a lot more efficient. And yet, I always covered it up. I always covered up the fact that I was working from home. And that is because legitimately caregiver bias, that's a legit bias, and working from home is a legit bias, right? There was always this notion that, oh, if you didn't give that FaceTime, that would hold you back, right? Or that you weren't actually working when you were working from home. And so I often found myself covering up. So I would be on calls, and when my kids were younger, if they were being loud, I would like escape to the garage or anywhere that I could go to not admit that I was working from home.
And I think particularly for women, right? Because there was that fear of discrimination and kind of reprisal in the workplace, or maybe a lack of promotions if you dared to kind of publicly talk about the fact that you have children and that you had to juggle.
You're exactly right, of course. And again, I worked at places that had remote working policies. And yet I still felt a real need to cover up the fact when I was doing it for those very valid reasons. And so I think what I'm learning now and what I've done, and in fact, even like the Zoom calls that I schedule in the here and now, I'm often titling them, kids, partners, pets, all welcome, right? I mean, that people need to understand that we all should be bringing our whole selves to work. Right. And this is, and actually we can't not right now. And I think that is what our study at Have Her Back really took a look at.
And is that practical? Because I completely agree. I don't have children, but like we had my nephews the other day looking after them, and it's kind of the same thing. Like all of a sudden there's like running steps through the Zoom call. But I completely agree, and I do well for the people who are listening who are like, well, that's not going to work. Like, do you think it is actually practical as well as the right thing to do?
Well, so here's what I think. I think longer term, right now in the here and now, when you've got all the schools that are essentially in e-learning mode. And in fact, today I saw news that actually schools are in Washington DC and other places are actually going to end early because the e-learning is not working. So even if you had maybe that small distraction for your kids, you're not going to have that necessarily. So right now in the current circumstances, these distractions and interruptions are here to stay. I think though, why this is going to have a really good impact on the long term is because men are experiencing caregiving, like working while parenting. And when I say men, at all levels, including the leaders who make the policies and enforce the policies, are experiencing caregiving, right, and parenting while working in ways that they never had before. So it was interesting when we did our Have Her Back study, right? Now, all working parents are finding working at home while parenting right now difficult. Like, that's not a shock. Okay, everyone to some degree is finding difficult, but 31% of dads said it was extremely difficult versus 14% of moms, right? So they're really feeling it. The other thing that's really interesting is that 38% of dads, and this is a very high number, actually reported that they are the primary caregiver during COVID-19, which was surprising.
It's quite high. It's higher than we would think.
You would think, right? I was surprised by this. But then, of course, when you start to look into it, it's a lot because a lot of women are really on the front lines, right? And they're the essential workers in healthcare. So they're actually really having to go to work. And a lot of men are really having to be the primary caregiver. But even if you are sharing the caregiving, right, this is a new day for men. It's like what we like to call, it's a nice way to say, earned empathy, right? They are really now understanding how hard it is. And then I think coupled with that, I think there is an acceptance, not even just an acceptance, but essentially a demand that remote working is here to stay, right? Now, it won't always be here to stay where you don't have resources. You know, we are going to get back to a time where schools are going to have to reopen in some way, shape, or form, right? And you will have resources to be able to do that. But in the here and now, remote working, everyone is saying, okay, this is something that we're going to need for the long term. So there's an acceptance to remote working in ways that there weren't in the past, right? So I think we found that 87% of all workers expected to be able to work remotely way beyond this pandemic, right? So, and that's all respondents. That's not men, that's women, that's everyone who felt that way. And so because of that empathy and also the acceptance of remote working, I think one of the most interesting, almost the most startling response that we got was that actually men, almost 90% of dads reported that women, particularly after having children, would benefit professionally and would climb the career ladder faster because of the acceptance of remote working.
That's so
100%.
interesting. Well, that's a real positive, isn't it, to come from this awful situation if we can move towards that transition where more of us can
I
feel.
I was quite surprised, but in a very good way.
Yeah, that's one really great thing. I haven't heard that data before, so that's really interesting. So if people want to find the survey and want to hear more about Have Her Back Consultancy, where can they head to? Where can they learn more about you, Carolyn?
Well, of course. So haveherback.com is our URL. So you can find us there. You can find us on social. And the study has actually gotten written up quite a bit. So you can find it media coverage in Entrepreneur, in Forbes as well. And I think, what's going to be interesting for us is we conducted this study a couple weeks ago. We want to conduct it again because, right, you can just imagine with more time doing this under their belts, how it will continue to go forward. But I think even more than even the parents piece of this, I think the acceptance and the demands of remote working are really interesting. And in fact, I think I just want to make sure I get this right. It was millennials, people of color, women, and dads all ranked the ability to work remotely going forward as the number one reason that they're going to switch their jobs. So if you're a company, right now, you have to be thinking about retaining and, of course, eventually
100%.
Recruiting more talent. And this is going to be a huge way in which to do that.
I couldn't agree more. And to be honest, I think that's frankly a big part of the reason why a lot of men and women start their own company in the first place is so that they have that flexibility and that capacity to kind of steer the ship in their own direction. And I think that is a great thing.
I would agree.
I think that's a great thing. And also in terms of cost of living, there's so many positives if you can be remotely. At PepTalkHer, our team are entirely remote. So we work across 3 countries and 4 time zones, which is always fun trying to work out the team meeting time. But it's, a small concession to have the team meeting at 6 p.m. or get up at 7 a.m. for a meeting if it means that, for 365 days a year, you can essentially be working from where is convenient for you and your family, which is wonderful.
Right. But think of it this way. I mean, you were on the forefront of something, and now you are probably considered an expert in what every company is trying to harness and figure out right now, which is such an incredible opportunity, right, to be in. So I think it's wonderful. And I think it's also incumbent upon us. This isn't just about working parents. I think it's really, really important for everyone to welcome and encourage this right now because of the long-term impact that we'll have. I mean, it was interesting. My husband, I think one of the first weeks that we were working from home, again, I could overhear him, and he is a sports marketing executive, and he was talking to he's a beer executive. What is wrong with me? He was talking to a sports league executive. And I overheard him saying very earnestly, hey, listen, go watch Frozen with the girls. We can finish this conversation tomorrow. Wow. And I thought to myself in that moment, I'm like, that would have been unheard of, right, prior to this. That would have been just an unheard of way to end that conversation. And he earnestly meant it. And so I actually, made a point to say to him, I was so impressed with that, right? And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to really, to share how much that means when you are working with colleagues or coworkers and they have their kids come in, because you feel the need, you want to cover it up, right? Just like that BBC dad did all those 2017 with the viral video. We all watched that. We were all hysterically laughing. We were all sharing that, and we were all thanking God it didn't happen to us. Right?
Exactly.
That's what we did.
Exactly.
And I think we all need to encourage it because of the long-term and potential positive impact.
Well, this has been awesome, as always, talking to you. I'm so excited to read the rest of the study. If you haven't already checked it out, you can go to haveherback.com. The study is super interesting about the working from home trends and how that's going to shift the trajectory of workforces all around the world. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really grateful that you could be here on the Power Pep Talk for today. And we'll be back again the same time tomorrow. Thank you so much.